Let's spend a little time praying to that end, that Jesus is the King forever. He is worthy of it all, and He is above it all. So I'm just going to lead us in a couple of prompts this morning. If you would like to take a seat, find a posture that you'd like to pray in. You can stay standing, you can be seated, you can get on a knee, whatever is a position you'd like to spend a few minutes in this morning. I'm just going to invite you to do that. Upward prayer, the truth about God, who God is. He is worthy of it all. He is holy. He is the King forever. He reigns above it all. So just right there, would you just tell the truth about God? Just pray that. You are, fill in the blank. Go ahead. Yeah, Lord, it's just fun to tell the truth about you. It just brings assurance and calm and peace. Just to say the words, you're worthy of it all. To say the words, you're King of Kings. To say the words that you reign above all of this. That we can rest in that. We can rest in your control. We can rest in your strength and your power and your might. We can just rest in it. So as we declare these truths about you, just tell the truth about who you are. I just pray that it would just bring a rest to us. This morning we're going to talk about future things. And I'm just going to ask you right now, what's something future on your mind and on your heart that you'd like to pray for? It could be future tomorrow. It could be future 2 weeks. It could be future years from now. Would you just pray for it? Just say, Lord, this is happening, and praying either for your grace or for your hand to move, whatever it is. Would you spend some time praying for something that's going to take place in the future in your life? Let's do it. Lord, it's hard sometimes because we just get so focused on today and the here and now that we forget that you're in control of the future. You know it. And nothing takes you by surprise. And so you want us to pray about what's around the corner. And what's amazing is you hear all of these different prayers and you shoulder them. You care. I think about these families that were just standing up here and the future prayers that they're praying for their kids to love you, to follow you, to trust you, to reprioritize everything in their life around you and your son Jesus. Lord, I pray for those of us who are praying for some hard appointments in the days to come, some hard conversations, some things we've not been looking for. I pray that you just reassure in this moment. Yeah, I pray you'd reassure in this moment. Father, thanks for your word. Thanks for this young man, Daniel. And it's been super fun working through this book. I pray you just speak to us. You clearly want to speak to us. So I pray we would hear from you. We would listen. See what you have to say. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen. Awesome. Thank you guys for praying with me. I am pretty excited. I got a new toy I want to show you. Can I show it to you? I got online and I found the statue, Nebuchadnezzar's statue from Daniel 2. Here's the story. I was looking for just an image. I just wanted an image. I was wanting something for us to see. And I was never in my wildest dreams thinking I was actually going to find the statue itself. And I did, and $20 later, it's mine. I was like, I got to have that. And what's even cooler about it is the rock that we're fixing to learn about, this is magnetic right here. Like, how cool is that, right? I mean, this is great. Now, I was already sold the minute I saw it was a little bit of a sketchy looking website, but I was going to give it a try anyway. And the thing that sold me was the very first line was, this statue in all caps says this is an incredible witnessing tool so that you can show the fulfillment of Daniel 2. And I'm like, I don't know about walking around with this like, hey, let me tell you about Daniel 2. So if you see me walking around with it, you'll know I'm trying to get all of my money's worth. We're going to see this a few times. For those of you that would like a little closer look, let me show it to you there. We took a picture of it, and I'm going to draw on this here in a minute. It is pretty lifelike for sure. So Daniel chapter 2, we covered the first 28 verses in a very hurried fashion last week. We're going to try to cover the rest of the chapter this week. So if you've got your Bibles, Daniel 2, we're going to start reading in verse 29. Here we go. As for you, O king, this is Daniel talking, while you were on your bed, your thoughts turned to what would take place in the future, and he, that's the God of heaven, who reveals mysteries, has made known to you what will take place. So just brief overview, just to recap, we got Daniel, and Nebuchadnezzar had a dream in the second year of his reign. It gave him some serious troubling. It kept him from sleeping at night. So he brings all the conjurers, the magicians, and the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. And he says, here's the deal. I want you to tell me what I dreamed about, and then you're going to tell me the interpretation. And if you don't do that, I'm going to rip off your arms and legs and burn your house down. Remember? So that's our guy. And he wants to hear the dream. He's not going to tell the dream first. I want you to tell me the dream, and then I want you to tell me what its interpretation is. That way, I know you guys are legit. Obviously, they can't do it, so the decree goes out to kill all of these wise men, and we know who is in that crowd: Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. And so they get to Daniel, and Daniel's like, whoa, what's the rush? Why am I fixing to be killed? And they tell him the story, and Daniel says, give me a little time. He goes to the king and says, give me a little time, and I'll tell you the dream, and I'll tell you the interpretation. He stands in the gap. And so sure enough, he gets with his boys, and they pray, and God reveals this dream. And so now Daniel goes to the king and says, I got it, and now this is the time where he stands before Nebuchadnezzar in a bold fashion and is going to tell him what God has revealed to him. And this is future events. That's what the text says, future events. So remember, God has spoken to Nebuchadnezzar in a dream. He's given him some divine revelation about the future. And this dream needs an interpretation. And so that's where Daniel is. So let's keep reading, verse 30. But as for me, this mystery has not been revealed to me for any wisdom residing in me more than any other living man. Like, this isn't about me being more wise. This isn't about me listen, this is about something else. And he tells you, he says it right here. He says, but for the purpose of making the interpretation known to the king, that you may understand the thoughts of your mind. Now remember, last week we circled a couple of words. One of them was declare, because it shows up, it and its synonym, some 30 times in chapter 2. And there it is there. Declare, make known, reveal. And Daniel says, I'm here. It's been revealed to me, and now I'm going to make it known to you. And the other word we circled was interpretation. It is incredibly clear and important that we know what the interpretation to this dream is. And so Daniel is fixing to give it. He goes on and says this in verse 31, you, O king, were looking, and behold, was a single great statue. That statue, which was large and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. So he goes right into it. You need it? I got it. Here's the dream. What you were looking at was a big statue, and it was awesome and full of splendor, and it was magnificent. So I'm not thinking it's a 10-inch statue here. I'm thinking it's big, right? It's a big statue. It's got a look to it. It probably is a little intimidating. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar is going to lose sleep over this thing, right? And so it is big, it is awesome. He tells them right up front, in your dream, you are looking at a statue. So then he goes on and tells them this. Verse 32. The head of the statue was made of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. So he tells them the dream and says, this is what you got, right? You got this statue, you got head, or you got gold, silver, bronze, iron, and then you got this mixture at the bottom. So what I'd like to do is, before we get to the interpretation, let's just make some basic observations about this statue that I think will come into play in a little bit. The first thing we need to know is there is a sequential, logical order to this, okay? This isn't just some random thoughts where we have clearly, starting at the top, the head, and working its way all the way down to the toes. This is logical and sequential. It doesn't go from the head to the legs to the chest. It doesn't do that. It works its way in a logical, sequential order. That'll be important for us. Something else that's pretty easy is not only is it descending in this way from head to toe, but it's also doing it in the value of the metals. So we obviously have gold here, and then we have silver, and then we have bronze, iron, and then we have this mixture of iron and clay. So we know we are moving from more expensive to less valuable. So we are moving again in a logical, sequential order, head to toe, and we know we have the gold as the most precious, with clay being at the bottom. Okay, just keep those things in mind. One other thing I'd show you here that's sometimes easy to miss is, you notice he talked about the feet and the toes, whereas up front he didn't talk about hands and fingers. Right? So that's the reason most of the time when you see an image of this statue, it's always with arms crossed, no hands and no fingers being seen, because these feet and toes are probably going to be important for us, especially when we get to Daniel chapter 7. The reason for that would be, how many toes do you have? 10. That number is going to come up a couple of times. So we'll just mark it here, and we'll just keep that stored away for later when we get to some other chapters. Okay, those are some basic observations. Let's keep reading and see what else is in this dream. He goes on in verse 33. He says, you continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. And then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found. But that stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. There is the dream. He looks at him and says, hey, not only did you see this statue, which in and of itself isn't probably worthy of making you scared, but now all of a sudden we got a rock. Remember my magnetic rock here? We have a rock that comes in and hits the statue in its weakest point, the clay and the brittle clay mixed with iron, and it destroys not only the clay, but also the iron and the bronze and the silver and the gold. Now, what's the word used there? Crushed. Super important. It doesn't say it dented it. It doesn't say it knocked it over. It doesn't say it kind of, set it back a little bit. No, it says completely crushed all of these things. This rock shows up and does that. And then, to give an illustration of the crushing, it says it's like chaff being blown away by the wind. Now, most of us today don't think like an ancient Near Eastern, and we don't have a working knowledge of the agriculture and farming that they used to do back in the day. So let me just tell you about chaff, because I need you to have a clear picture of what the total destruction is here. So chaff would be when you were a farmer and you were raising anything with a head on it with grain, like oats or barley or wheat, any of those kind of things that have a grain, it's in a husk, and it's got this protective husk around it, a head of grain. And in order to get that grain out, you can either do it in your hands, which would take a long time, or what they would do is they would go to a threshing floor. And a threshing floor would be a large, hard floor that they would take all the grain that they've harvested, even inside the head, and they would lay it down. And then they would take like some sort of livestock, an oxen or maybe a donkey, and they would walk around on that wheat, barley, oats, you name it, and they would walk around on it. And as they would do it, they would crush that grain and get it out of the head. And so then what would happen is, because that threshing floor was by wind, it would be access to wind, what they would do is they would take a pitchfork and throw all of that stuff into the air. And then the wind would come by and blow everything that was chaff, all the residue of that husk that's not valuable. And the wind would blow it away. Now, what would happen to the wheat, barley, and oats? It would fall to the ground because it had substance to it. And so then they would take that wheat, barley, and oats, and then they would go do their thing with it. So that's the picture he wants you to have. This statue is going to be completely destroyed. Gold, silver, bronze, and iron are all going to be completely destroyed, blown away like dust. And what does it? This big rock. And the text says it's a rock not made with human hands. Now, immediately, all of us living on this side of the New Testament are saying, hey, I know what that is, right? And that's Jesus. Hold your horses. We're going to get there in a minute, okay? We're going to get there. But that's what we've got. We've got this stone that is going to come in, and there's going to be a complete and total, chaotic collision that takes place. Not only does that stone come in and hit the weakest part of the statue but destroy all of it, it's also going to grow into a mountain that's going to fill the entire earth. It's going to grow into a big mountain, and the entire earth is going to be covered by it. So that's what we have. Now, before I move on, I just need you to remember what happens is we get all on the statue here and we forget that there's a story taking place. Remember, this is a 15-year-old boy, Daniel, who has had a vision or had a dream revealed to him. And now he's going to Nebuchadnezzar and he is telling him the dream. And what happens if he gets the dream wrong? He's going to lose his arms and legs and his house is going to be burnt down, right? This is a big deal. Like, this is not just some little bit of, hey, let me just kind of shoot from the hip here kind of a thing. He goes in and he's telling him the dream. Now look at what it says in verse 36. This was the dream. Now we will tell its interpretation before the king. If it were me, this is how I would do it. I would look at him and say, does any of this sound familiar? Like, am I on the right track? Head of goal, right rock, right? That's what I would do. I'd like a little feedback to make sure I'm on the same page. Not Daniel. He is so confident that the Lord has given him this dream. He's just ready to move on. Let's interpret this rascal right now. You ready, king? Here we go. Then he says this in verse 37. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Who do we normally associate with the King of kings? It's not Nebuchadnezzar, right? He says, you're the King of kings. He said, you're the most influential man on the planet. You're the most powerful man on the planet. You are over Babylon, and there is no other kingdom like yours right now. We are going to learn this multiple times throughout this book. Right in that moment, that is the place. Matter of fact, this isn't the only time Nebuchadnezzar is going to be called a king of kings. Look at in Ezekiel chapter 26, it says this. For thus says the Lord, behold, I will bring upon Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses, chariots, cavalry, and a great army. Those are big words. This guy has a ton of responsibility. He has a lot of influence. Then look at it. He says, not only that, but the Lord, the God of heaven, has given the kingdom, the power, and the strength, and the glory. Does that sound like the tail end of the Lord's Prayer? Wow. It's a lot here. Let's keep reading. And wherever the sons of men dwell, that would be man, wherever mankind dwells, or the beast of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hands and has caused you to rule over them all. That's you, Nebuchadnezzar. You have a ton of influence. You have a ton of responsibility. Birds, beasts, all of it, mankind, that is you. Now, before we get too uncomfortable with this, what's the key phrase here? Who's given all of this to Nebuchadnezzar? It says the God of heaven has done it. The God of heaven has allowed you to have this kind of influence. Now, those of you who really want to go ahead, look ahead at chapter 4, read it. It's fantastic because God's going to tell him, you haven't been doing a great job with what I've asked you to be responsible with. This sounds a lot like the dominion mandate. Dominion mandate, Genesis 1:28. It's not going to be on the screen. You can just listen to these words. You know them well. Genesis 1, so I'll start in verse 27. God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and rule over fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the earth. That's what the dominion mandate is. I want you to protect. I want you to rule it and subdue it. I want you to do those things as man. Matter of fact, all 8 billion people on the planet are image bearers. And we represent God on the planet by ruling and having dominion and doing that. Now listen, some of us have a little bit larger influence than others. But we all are responsible for something. And it's all been given to us by who? So here in Nebuchadnezzar, he has a lot of influence. And he has been given a dominion mandate that is pretty significant. Something else that is super important here is Nebuchadnezzar would have thought this mandate came from his God. Matter of fact, there are some great inscriptions on rocks that have been found where it says, Marduk has given all of these things to Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel saying, no, it's not Marduk. It's the God of heaven. The God of heaven. By the way, this is just for free. No Adonai, no Yahweh, no Elohim. What's the name of God in Daniel so far? The God of heaven. That's really interesting. Remember last week we said that these gods don't dwell with mortal flesh. They live up there. So Daniel's saying, I know you believe that there are some gods up there. And guess who's the God of them all? God of heaven. The God that I serve, the God that I worship. So there's been this mandate given. Just really quickly, I think it'd be important to talk about this. Again, you've all been given responsibility. We're responsible for ourselves. We've been given responsibility for our families. We're given responsibilities where we live, where we work, where we play. We are given a responsibility. That's what we're tasked to do. Now here's the deal. Leaders act on that responsibility. Leaders act on it. We move toward it. We do the right thing in those moments. We sit back and say, this is a responsibility, and I lead and I move toward that. That's what leadership is. It's not just saying, I have responsibility. It's saying, I act on it. More on that here in a moment because we have a tremendous responsibility with all of this kingdom stuff going on. Okay? Just mark that down. So now he says this. After talking about it, he goes on and says that you, Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold. The head of gold. So as the interpretation goes, Nebuchadnezzar is the head. Nebuchadnezzar is associated with Babylon. So I'm going to put Babylon here. And we're going to have that play out here in a moment because he's not just talking about Nebuchadnezzar. He's talking about the kingdom of Babylon as a whole. It makes a ton of sense because Babylon is it's the greatest nation on the planet right now. Got a ton of influence. And so let's keep reading and see what else we have as we read through it. Goes on, he says this, verse 39. After you, Nebuchadnezzar, there will arise another kingdom inferior to you. Now that's a big deal. After you, there's another kingdom coming. Does anybody remember when Daniel called all the sorcerers, magicians, and Chaldeans in, and what was the first words out of their mouth? You, O king, live forever. What did Daniel just tell him? There's going to be somebody after you. This is a 15-year-old boy. He just looked at the most powerful man on the planet and has threatened everyone in his little circle that I'm going to rip your arms and legs off and then I'm going to burn your house down. And he just looked at him and said, man, you're not going to live forever. I know you want to hear that, but that's not true. There's going to be a kingdom after you. And it's inferior, but there's a kingdom after. Those of us that know our world history know that that kingdom is pretty simple. It would be Persia. And about 539 BC, Cyrus shows up and he takes care of Babylon. Fascinating. If you know your history, you know how they did it. The Euphrates goes through Babylon, or did. And then what happened was they dug trenches around the Euphrates River to lower the water level. That's what Cyrus did, so that his army could march through the riverbed and then attack the city through a place they never thought it would be coming. That's crazy, isn't it? So we know the next empire that would come up would be Persia. This is going to be attested to in Daniel 7 and 8, but it's going to be called the Medo-Persian Empire. Medo-Persia, and that's why we think we have the two arms here. The two arms of this Medo-Persian Empire. Medo-Persia would have been a northern and a southern Iran at the time. So that's what we have here, is this Persian Empire coming through. Let's keep reading. What does he say next? He doesn't give us a ton of detail, but he says, then another, verse 39, then another kingdom of bronze, which will rule over the earth. Another kingdom of bronze. And we know this other kingdom that's going to happen after Persia is going to be the Greeks, or Greece. We know Alexander the Great is going to come on the scene and he's going to conquer the known world with some 20 square miles or 20,000 square miles of just absolute terrain that he's going to wreak havoc on. And we know for him that that's going to take place at around 335 BC. So remember, the king is having this around 603 BC. So 70 years into the future, Daniel's saying Persia's going to take over. And then some nearly 200 years in the future, Alexander the Great is going to roam around. We'll talk more about that. That also was going to be attested to in Daniel chapter 7. So then what happens? What's next? He goes on. He says this in verse 40. Then there will be a fourth kingdom, as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things, like iron that breaks in pieces. It will crush and break all these pieces. So iron comes along, and those of us, again, who know our world history on any timeline, any secular timeline is going to tell you what comes after Greece. Rome. Rome comes after Greece with Pompey there in 146, and then the fall of Carthage later is going to end the eastern part of that reign. But this is what we have, all of these kingdoms following here. Now, Rome would have a ton of influence. And Rome's going to influence us even today. There's architecture and art, language. I mean, you talk about all kinds of ways that it affected us. Matter of fact, some of our laws are affected now by Rome. The idea of innocent till proven guilty, a senate, the idea of representation. All of those things we gathered and got from Rome. Rome has a significant influence. It is strong and mighty, and this idea of crushing and the things that it did, it absolutely fits with iron. Now, we had a pretty long description of the head, and now we're going to have a really long description of the feet and the toes. So most scholars agree this is what we're looking at from a historical standpoint. So let's keep reading. This is where things are going to get a little tricky. It says this in verse 41, in that you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As the toes and the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, that they will combine with one another in the seed of men. But they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. So a couple of things that we can, again, take notice of here. We have now the introduction of a non-metal. So we've been dealing with metals up until this point, and now we have clay. He tells us that this mixture of clay is the seed of men. And all kinds of debate is going on what is the seed of men. I think the seed of men is us, men. It's just men. That when we begin to mix this authoritarian monarchy and these governments with mankind and the ability to have representation and voting and all of this, what we find out is that these kingdoms get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And so there's a weakness down here. It says they don't play well together. They don't match well together. We can see that thousands of years later, can't we? Because politicians will tell you anything they want to get your what? See how it works? So this mixture together is happening. And so this idea of a mixture of clay and of iron. Something else we look at here is we're trying to figure out what would be the next major world power after Rome. And we can't name it. It's really tricky on the timeline. And so here, we got to put a question mark. Now, I do think we're going to get some good, solid answers to this. And I think the best way to do it is just to keep reading the passage, right? So some of these we can see immediately. But this one here seems to be tricky because we can't, on the timeline, a historical timeline, find what is the world power that follows Rome. So let's keep reading. He goes on and says this. Verse 44. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but itself will endure forever. So we know that God's going to set up a kingdom, and that kingdom is going to take care of all of these kingdoms. So let's just take a look at it. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven, we've already talked about this, God of heaven, he's going to do something. He's going to set up a kingdom. And when he sets up this kingdom, it's never going to be destroyed. There's no rock that's going to come in and destroy it. There's no enemy that can take it over. You can't drain the Euphrates and march in on the kingdom of God. It's not going to work like that. And not only that, it won't be left for another people. Like no one else is going to inherit this. This isn't going to be left to someone. No. It's over. And then he says it's going to put an end to these other kingdoms, and God's kingdom will endure forever. It's going to endure forever. Now, when you hear the word kingdom there, the word kingdom for the nation of Israel would have been very familiar. Abraham was promised that he would be a great nation, he would have lots of descendants, and he would have a land, and all the people on the planet are going to be blessed through him. That's going to be reiterated to Isaac, it's going to be reiterated to Jacob, and then the people start griping because they want a king, and God says, I'm your king. Does that sound like a kingdom to you? And then he sat back and said, I gave you all these laws. I chose you. You're mine. If you'll do these laws, our fellowship with each other will be great. But they don't obey. They want their own king. So he gives them Saul, and that didn't work out. He gave them David, and it was mediocre at best. And then God made a declaration and a covenant with David and said, there's someone who's going to come on your line, who's going to sit on the throne, and he's going to reign forever. So the nation of Israel was anticipating a kingdom to be set up by God, who that king would come in the line of David. So this idea of enduring and lasting forever, right? And so when we read that, the next question is, how would God set that up? Look at verse 45. God would set it up this way. It says, inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, no human did this, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, and the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. So the dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Remember that whole Jesus spiel we went through a minute ago? There's a stone cut without human hands. And that stone that's going to be cut out of the mountain is Jesus, because he is the rock. Matter of fact, Psalm 118:22, I don't have time to read it there. That Isaiah 28:16, we can go to these places and see where the Old Testament talks about Jesus being this stone. Matter of fact, Peter is going to call him the stone that the builder, or the foundational stone, that cornerstone. He's going to talk about it in Acts 4 and in his epistle. Jesus is clearly that stone, and he's been made without hands. He has no earthly father. And what happens? He destroys the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, and it's going to be a kingdom forever. So what are you thinking right now? The kingdom's here. Is it? Is it here? Yes and no. Yes and no. Because when we come back over here, what do we know? Was Rome completely destroyed when Jesus came to the planet the first time? He was not. Matter of fact, it would go on another 400 years on one side and another 1,400 years on the other. So we know that this stone, when Jesus came the first time, didn't completely annihilate it. And then we've got to deal with these feet and toes, and where do they come in? And I actually think this is future. We hadn't seen this kingdom yet. Can I put a parenthesis right here in my sermon and show you something I think might be helpful to us? Parentheses would be this. In Daniel, just like in other Old Testament literature, we have what you call literary origami. I did this with Genesis 1-3. Mike Arnold, our men's pastor, he thought it was so great, he slept through the entire sermon. And so I'm going to do it anyway just to give Mike a chance to take a nap. Go ahead, take a nap, Mike. Here, you'll be fine. So we have chapter 2, we have chapter 3, we have chapter 4, and if we fold them on the line, that dotted line, 2 corresponds with chapter 7, 3 corresponds with chapter 6, and 4 corresponds to chapter 5. So there's a lot of this that I'm going to be able to get to again when we get over here to chapter 7, because you're going to be like, there's 4 beasts, and they sound like a lot like those things on the statue. You're right, because 2 and 7 go together. Make sense to you? So I'm going to come back to this. A lot of these things, especially these kingdoms over here when we get to chapter 7. So the question is how in the world, if we know that Jesus is going to set up a kingdom, and we know this kingdom is going to be eternal and last forever, if he came the first time, what did Jesus accomplish? And then what's he going to accomplish the second time he comes? Very quickly, the first time that Jesus came, he came saying, the kingdom is here. Y'all remember when he would say that? The kingdom is here. Why could Jesus say the kingdom is here? Because he's the king. And did they embrace him as the king? They rejected him, said, crucify us, we want Barabbas. So he offered the kingdom. They didn't want the kingdom. So he was rejected. And so now, in his death, burial, and resurrection, he has ascended into heaven. He has gone to prepare a place. And one day he's going to come again. But this is what I know. Here's how the kingdom is here. Because all of us who have put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, Colossians says the hope of glory, Jesus, lives in you. So that means Jesus, the king, is in you. And wherever the king is, that's the what? That's where the kingdom is. So everywhere you go, what are you taking with you? The kingdom. So who is responsible for making the kingdom look good until Jesus shows back up? Now that's a sermon, right? Remember that whole responsibility thing? It's called being an ambassador. Right? It's called being an ambassador. Because everywhere the king is, that's where the kingdom is. And that's what we do in the meantime. What about when he returns the second time? I showed you these charts. I showed you this chart in the very first sermon. And I told you that Daniel could see these Gentile powers. Babylon, Greece, Medo-Persia, Rome. He could see it. And he could see that there was a time when the Messiah is coming. We're going to get to that in Daniel 9. And he could see that there's this time of righteousness, this 1,000-year reign of Jesus. And what Daniel is seeing right now with the rock is Daniel is seeing this. He's seeing the second coming. He's seeing the time when Jesus comes, and when he does, he's going to set up his 1,000-year reign, and he's going to sit on a physical throne, and he is going to reign in a physical kingdom for 1,000 years. And so that's what he's seeing currently. Now, this is where we are. Remember, we're in this veiled gap. We're in this gap right there between the legs of iron and the iron and clay of the feet and toes. This iron and clay of feet and toes, somehow those feet and toes correspond to Rome because the iron represents Rome. And those 10 toes represent some sort of one world government that incorporates 10 kings, and all of that we can talk about later, but this is a veiled gap we sit in now. This is where we are now. Let me show it to you this way. Israel falls in 605 BC. That's where our boy Daniel is. Babylon, Greece, Medo-Persia, Rome, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, the descending of the Holy Spirit, the time of the church, that's all happening in the time of the Gentiles. I read Luke 21:24, the first sermon, until the time of the Gentiles. So we're still in the time of the Gentiles until Jesus shows up. And when Jesus shows up right there, that's when Israel was restored, and he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now, I know some people might say, well, I kind of think the kingdom's a spiritual thing. And that's fine. But for me, I look at it and I say, this was physical and literal. This was physical, and this was physical. Why all of a sudden would Jesus now just be a spiritual kingdom? They were anticipating a physical kingdom. And one day, Jesus is going to show back up. And when he does, he's going to let everybody know who's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's good stuff, isn't it? That's it. Let me show you why this is really important to us at Faith Bible Church. Ma'am, I'm over time, but let me give you a couple things. Here's our doctrinal statement here. History is controlled by the sovereign rule of God and will culminate in the establishment of his kingdom upon the earth. A kingdom that is ruled by his Son and those who have placed their faith in him. Now that's our general doctrinal statement. But we drilled down on it a little bit more because we think this is really important for us. So we have an expanded doctrinal statement that says this. The second coming of Christ, God will fulfill his promises to Israel and establish a literal 1,000-year kingdom of Christ on the earth. Jesus is going to come back. And when he does, he's going to set up the greatest government in history. It's called a monarchy. It's a monarchy. And guess who's sitting on the throne? Jesus Christ. There will be no need for a vote or representation because he is the perfect king. He's the perfect king. So, in the meantime, a couple things you need to be aware of. Wherever the king is, that's where the kingdom is. So we have a responsibility to represent the kingdom well wherever you go. Right? One last thing. I'm already out of time, but I'm going to do it anyway. You ready? Yeah. In the days of those kings. The days of those kings. So in the days of those kings, which I think represent down here with the toes and the feet, this is what everybody wants to spend their time on. Who are those kings? Who are those kings for the rock to come and destroy them? Is it Putin? Is it Trump? Is it... Shh. What's the focus? There is an eternal kingdom coming. And we need to be representing him well now, not reading headlines trying to figure out when it's going to happen. Let me pray for us. Father, thanks for your word. Thanks for the fact that you're coming in again. Thanks that all the mess we see in this world, failed governments and And it's going to be a time when you restore this place to the way you wanted it. But until then, we get to be a light. We get to be salt. We get to be a little reflection of that. And so I pray that we at Faith Bible Church would be little kingdoms running around, representing you well, representing the King, the good King well, until you come and make no doubt. So yeah, Lord, thank you. Pray that as we sing and declare your holiness and declare your authority, that you're honored and that we rest in it. We rest in it. So, Faith Bible Church, I'm just going to pray over you. Lord, I pray that us as a body, that we would be people who could love well and point people to the good King, your Son. I pray that we would be people filled with hope and not despair. I pray that we could look ahead, that you are going to keep your promises, and we can rest in that. And we look forward to the day that we rule with you. We love you, Lord. It's in your Son's name. Amen.